Hey guys, I am working on a bit of an experiment right now to do a stylized leaf texture, and it's using a base translucent shader so you can, have your leaves just be square polygons. You can paint it however you want, and that's your base color, this texture. And it goes through just a simple fuzzy shading, and it spits out the result essentially. I parameterized everything. I'm adding in this little emissive bit right here, and it may not be necessary, but this is sort of to fake an ambient light being cast on it. My reasoning for this is traditionally, if you come from a Maya background, an ambient light is basically a light that is shooting an even number of rays in all directions equally across your scene. It's getting blanketed with light. And there's not really a function to do that in Unreal in the sense that there's not an ambient light. However, my reasoning is if you have your mesh emitting light and just enough to where it's not casting many shadows, it's kind of the same deal. And if it's not too powerful, it seems like you can sort of fake it with this. So whether or not this is effective remains to be seen. I'm going to be sending this particular asset off to a buddy to tell me how it works for what he wants it to do to get a sort of stylized look. But again, just my reasoning here is that you have your base sort of color that's going to represent what your lit quote unquote object is going to look like, and that's just getting lerped with black for a shadow, and that shadow is going to come from the ambient occlusion texture. Again, reasoning just being objects that are more occluded are going to get more of a shadow, and we can kind of fake that with the ambient occlusion texture. It may not work exactly like that. It just sort of came to me in my head, and I think it gets the job done well enough. But again, it's something that remains to be seen. So that's kind of all there's there, just passing my ambient occlusion texture straight through. There's that sort of fake ambient light that I told you going on. My opacity mask is just coming from my opacity. Now, all of this over here, this is just actually me parameterizing this fuzzy shading material. Yeah, how to make sure everything's okay. This is just me giving all those parameters. The translucent base doesn't support normals, and that's actually kind of okay because another reasoning, you're not going to need it if you're using this for just some simple foliage. So I think that's okay. You're not going to need it in the sense that it's not going to particularly contribute to your style, or it's going to generally go unnoticed. And again, all of these are just getting parameters. Transparency, you can change the I added this just if you wanted your least more or less transparent. Just a simple sort of, that makes sense. But everything else is just going to be looked at based off of this fuzzy shading. I also added in a darkness parameter if you decided you wanted to paint which areas were going to be more dark. I'm using the red channel. That's actually arbitrary. I just needed to pull one single channel from this texture, so you would have to paint it as a grayscale to get it to work, but it's not going to make a difference. This could be green or this could be blue, as long as you're painting with the as long as it's a grayscale image, they're all going to produce the same results. And I just multiply this to invert it, since technically white would come out as full red. I actually wanted that area to be black. The areas you're painting are representing the areas that are going to be a little more dark. More likely than not, one would probably stick to just tuning an overall darkness, and that would be fine. And then all this over here is actually something I saw on the Unreal docs. Can't really pull the window over right now because OBS is being silly, but basically we're just taking this texture, again, an arbitrary leaf texture. In fact, you only need the alpha of this, and we're going to send it through dither temporal AA, and that is going to get multiplied with the alpha of our original leaf texture, so this look stays within the leaf. And this alpha is actually going to drive a lerp that will go between your leaf, your brushstroke tint, and the original image. And the way that I think this is working, if I interpret this correctly, you're pretty much dithering this and tiling it however you want. You'd want it to be a tileable texture. If you did want to tile this, and it's actually a little hard to see up over in these areas, but you're just running a dither to have your original base color, like that sort of kind of flat color, tinted however you want, and multiply, or not multiply, but lerp between this brush, which I might add like a contrast or something just to increase it. Maybe another multiply. That remains to be seen based off of feedback. My tints are also being weird at the moment. I'm having to like blow out colors to get it to work, but that's probably just because I missed something. Also because I'm using a multiply, so if my value's at 1, it's not going to do anything, I guess. I guess that's what it is. It's behaving a little weird. Still kind of working with the fuzzy shading to get the functionality that I want. But otherwise, it should be fairly straightforward to use. I think I've kept everything pretty organized. Let's go ahead and turn this off, and let's say that we're not going to use any brush strokes, and let that compile real quick. So you can kind of see now it just sort of has a shiny, fuzzy look to it. It's very even. And again, ignore the bad texture because I don't have a tablet. I don't have a drawing tablet on me at the moment. I suck with drawing with a mouse. I literally spent 5 seconds on this. That's all I needed was something simple to test with. If we go and turn it back on, give it a couple seconds, you'll notice now I have some patterns kind of breaking up the original texture. So now I'm getting some parts that are not only darker but sort of have that texture, and a lot of this look is arbitrary. You can draw whatever you want as long as you're giving that image an alpha, and you also can tint that color as well to get it to look different. So if I wanted this to be like max saturated and obscenely high value, of 30, because why not, hit OK on that, and it'll go and do its thing. Yeah, now I'm getting all of those areas to be red. Obviously, this looks really ugly. You wouldn't just do this, you'd use more reasonable values, but I'm just trying to overexpose it just to illustrate it. I mean, we always could like turn this to be a little red and or orange or something, I don't know, and tone that down just a bit. I mean, who knows, maybe it's the fall. I don't even know. You would get some sort of look out of this, is what you would want to do. Obviously, this is ugly, but this is just to demonstrate what you can do. A reasonable artist would only need to give this a simple diffuse, a normal texture, a quote-unquote darkness texture if you wanted that custom functionality. I will turn this on and it's probably going to make a very minute difference. But again, in fact, this level of detail might not even be necessary on leaves. You can see it actually kind of drastically change it. This level of detail might not even be necessary on leaves, but I'm sort of just a Nazi for detail, and there's maybe a scenario where this will be useful. I reckon that a lot of this is going to get taken out because it's not necessary, and this is actually quite a heavy shader. If you look, we've got 123 instructions in our vertex shader, and that may not seem like much, but if we're looking at our draw times up here, and that's 16 milliseconds, well, what if you've got 500 leaves on a tree, and then you've got, who knows, 20 of those trees. You're at 10,000, or yeah, you're at, let me do that math because I'm stupid. You should be at 10,000 if we had 500 times 20. Yeah, 10,000. Sorry guys, it's late. If you were at 10,000 instructions, now you're talking, that's going to eat up a significant amount. So this might be something that could be combined with like level of detail in a blueprint to kind of decide when to use this shader over another one. Maybe this could be completely scrapped and really only ever used for cinematics, or if you're just wanting something really pretty. I think that it's a good start, and I'll have to keep working with it. Otherwise, that's about it. So, just a short recap. This is just a simple, well, not too simple, leaf shader that gets a fuzzy look as well as a paintable brush texture for additional stylization. This could literally be whatever you want it to be. I might come back with something interesting later in an edit, but it's nothing too terribly fancy, but nice and parameterized, so it's very easy to adjust an instance of this. Thanks for watching, and I will hopefully see you guys in the next one.